India Confederation of the Blind. Training workshop on the rights of persons with disabilities with particular emphasis on the visually impaired for AICB affiliates in South India. Sponsored by Danish Association of the Blind. We have come to a post-lunch session now, and we are going to have a very important session also. And so for this, we have our speaker, our president, our advocacy chair, Dr. Anil Aneja, sir. Sir will be talking about social security, employment, and grievance redressal under RPD Act. Along with that, sir will share the AICB achievements also. So it will be very interesting, informative. So I kindly request all the participants to make use of the session. And I also have another request to make to all the participants. I know being a Sunday, you would receive many calls and people need to talk to you or something. But these sessions are also very important. So you might miss, when you attend the call, you might miss some important points or issues. So kindly just take your calls maybe after the sessions. It's our humble request. Thank you.
Yes, so good afternoon, everyone. Once again, hope you had all a very good lunch. Yeah, just give me a second. Yeah, sorry. So it's a very vast session, as Muthu seems to have indicated. Employment, grievance redressal, social security, and AICB achievements. I think we could have an entire workshop on this, one-day workshop at least, if not more than that. So it's a very vast topic. And rather than rushing to, because we're starting late and we are running a bit late, just give me a second. Yeah, sorry. So rather than rushing through this, I suggest that we try to cover as much as possible till our next speaker joins. And if something is left, if you are able to cover everything, very good. But if something is left, let me just set my camera. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so in case something is remaining, we would catch up after 3:30 then, when the talk on UNCRPD concludes. We can pick up something at that stage, because this is a topic I believe which should not be rushed through, as indeed no topic should be rushed through, but there are constraints of time. Just a minute, I'm having a bit of a difficulty, just give me a second. Yeah, but in this particular case, since we are starting late, I don't want anything to be missed due to constraints of time. And therefore, we would continue this topic after 3:30, after we finish the talk by Mr. Rajiv Rathori, in case anything is remaining. When we talk about employment first, I would say that it's a topic which is rather paradoxical. Paradoxical because on one hand, a lot of progress has been made as far as the area of employment for persons with disabilities, particularly the visually impaired, is concerned. On the other hand, I must also hasten to add that still much work remains to be done. And most of our cases, even today, are to do with employment. That is the irony of it. That's how essential employment is for anyone. Forget about persons with disabilities. Is a fact too well known to be discussed on a platform like this. It is said that the three fundamental needs of human beings are food, shelter, and clothing. And some people add health and social security also, as part of fundamental needs. Whether these are 3 or 5 or 7, that doesn't matter. The important thing is that to realize any of these fundamental needs, one needs money. And to have money, one needs to have income generating resources, which could be either vocations, businesses, or employment. Unless somebody has inherited such a large amount of money from somewhere that you can just keep that pending and keep spending it and you don't need to work. Also, I would say that even if that were to happen and somebody inherits a large amount of money and you don't need to work, the question that arises is, would that existence be a dignified existence? One may have money, but is money everything in life? Is fulfillment of needs everything in life? There is something called human worth and human dignity. And the realization of human worth and human dignity can only take place when you are doing something, to use a very commercial term, productive. But productive doesn't mean only commercial. Productive could be anything. You may be doing work in the social sector, and that's a very productive work. You may be helping your family. That's a very productive work. You may be looking after your homes. That's very productive work. Or you may be working in a bank or anywhere else. That's very productive. Productivity is not always economically generating, money generating, but definitely productivity is something that adds worth and value to life. And to the extent that employment is one of the very important means that adds worth, value, dignity, and quality to life, employment is, I would say, the most fundamental requirement for any human being. Could be any employment. You could be a laborer, that doesn't matter. You could be anything, but something that helps you break out your skills, that helps you live a quality life, that helps you live a life of dignity, worth, value, and contribute to society. Someone was recently telling me that when you employ someone, or when you keep working, forget, many people say at old age, why work? If one has enough resources, one can just relax. Somebody is just pointing out to me that you contribute to so many things. If you keep working, you add to your own sense of self-worth and health because you are active. You add to your income. You add to society because whatever you're doing by way of skills, adding to society. And you add to enrichment of others because whoever are working with you, one never works alone. They are also getting enriched by you and you are also getting enriched. And fifthly, you add to national income. Invariably, when you're working, either you pay income tax for your income or whatever you earn, you spend that money. So GST would be earned by the government. If you don't have that money, how would the government earn GST then? So you're also contributing to the country. And therefore, employment, no doubt to say, is the most essential. So if it's the most essential, what are the problems then, as far as persons with disabilities, particularly visually impaired persons, are concerned? Right to employment is granted as one of the fundamental rights in Indian Constitution. So there should be no difficulty getting the employment if you have the skills. And that's the point. The first point is whether we have the skills for employment. And many people may be deficient in those. Even if we have the skills, do we have the means to employment, technology, or any other means which had attitude? Most of the barriers in employment are attitudinal barriers. Do we have means of employment? And if yes, do we have the opportunities of employment? And this is where the real problem is there, because opportunities are there and yet these are not there. I would like to talk about a scenario around 60 years ago, 55, 60 years, almost very old, when a visually impaired person, I would not take the name because one should not name someone who is not present, A visually impaired person got the gold medal in a prestigious university in a very important subject, but he was denied employment in the very same university, stating that while it was all very fine for visually impaired persons to study, when it came to employment, they could not teach. And of course, he got employment in another university and rose up to be a very high position in academics. But that very university, which gave him the gold medal, refused to give him the opportunity to teach. That's why I said we have the opportunities and we do not have the opportunities. Another visually impaired person, when he got a job in a college affiliated to a state university in the 70s, was monitored for 2 weeks before he could be given formal appointment letter, because despite clearing the selection action committee and everything else, the institution was not convinced that he would be able to teach. So he was monitored for 2 weeks. This was the state of affairs in our enlightened institutions of education. Mr. Korn once shared a story with me that when he joined his job, which was got with great difficulty, a lot of agitation happened before he could get that job. But when he joined that job, as the lunchtime was there, he opened his tiffin box and suddenly saw a hand moving towards him, because his colleague thought maybe he will not be able to eat from the tiffin box, and therefore somebody tried to feed him, if my recollection of the story is correct. A hand was moving towards him and somebody tried to feed him, because they thought person couldn't even eat. If you can't even eat, how would you work? This was the issue of not just of opportunity, but dignity. So then, if this was the scenario in late 70s, early 70s, after Mr. Korn and Mr. Bittan and others formed the National Federation of Blind Graduates, and then which was renamed as National Federation of the Blind in 1972, when Mr. Korn was the Secretary General of that organization. So one of the first priorities Mr. Korn had taken up in that organization was employment. Strong agitation, strong hard work. It was owing to that on 4th November 1977, we had the first government OM employment reserving 3% vacancies in Group C and D services. It's important to know this because people normally associate reservation with PWD Act and so on. No, that is not the case. Neither reservation nor identification is associated with the Act initially. These were happening even earlier. If the reservation in employment started as early in 1977, the identification and post, even in Group A and B services, started as early as 1986. The first list was brought up in 1986. Unfortunately, as comfortable post as of a lecturer was not identified for the visually impaired in that place, despite the fact that a number of visually impaired persons, okay, some, if not a number, had worked as lecturers. This was 1986. In 1980s, principals of colleges would not even interview a visually impaired person, saying that if we don't have to employ one, why interview? This was the scenario. And one could not go anywhere. Our next speaker has joined. Rajiv, good afternoon. Please assign Rajiv the co-host. I will pause for a minute here because let me greet Rajiv. Rajiv, are you able to listen to us? Muthu and Aishwarya, please assign Rajiv co-host.
Yeah, I'm assigning co-host, sir. 1 minute.
Yeah. So, Rajiv, if you can listen to us, we are running a bit late. So maybe we would have your talk 10 minutes later than what we scheduled, but we try to rush up. But we are running slightly late. We had some very interesting talks in the morning. So the lunch was a bit late. Yeah. So, and one could not go anywhere. One could not appeal to a court of law because there was no law barring such attitudes. Many people wanted to appear for the IS, but they could not appear. It was as late as in 1993 that there was a Supreme Court judgment which permitted the visually impaired to appear in the civil services. The opportunity was not there at all. Even if the skills and the means were there were no opportunities. And whatever opportunities were there in employment were taken away due to attitudinal barriers. It is in this context then that the 1995 Act plays a significant role, because it was an act. The 1977 ON that I talked about, or the list of identified posts that I talked about, was something that was not, it didn't have a legislative mandate. Just a minute. Rajit, can you hear me?
Sir, I've asked him to unmute himself.
Rajit, I hope you are able to hear us.
Yeah. He has been given co-host
actually. Yes.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Okay, then continue. So, but the 1995 Act gave for the first time a legislative shape to employment. But was it enough? One thought so. If the law of the country is there, but naturally it should be followed everywhere. So at AICB in 1996, when we had the education committee, we thought that, okay, the law is there, so we should at least ensure to reserve 1% vacancies in education institutions for the visually impaired, and we moved towards that. We wrote to UGC and concerned bodies. After a bit of dilly-dally, the Universities Grants Commission, which is located at 1.5 miles distance from Parliament House, where this act was passed perhaps, wrote to us in October 1997 and signed a letter signed by no less a person than the Additional Secretary to UGC, saying that the PWD Act did not apply on UGC and education institutions. It said that it only applied on government bodies. We are an autonomous body, so it did not. I have that letter on record. I'm talking facts. And we had to move to Supreme Court of India in 1998 along with Nanda Bhandari Trust to ensure reservation in education institutions in the universities for the visually impaired. It was by an order, Supreme Court order dated 19 March 2002. The reservation, not just reservation, was granted to education institutions, but also 5% taxations in minimum eligibility conditions was affected. So all those people who are passing NET today, sometimes with relaxed standards of 5%, and also the scribe facility UPSC, that was the third issue that we had raised in that petition. All these three issues were decided by Supreme Court of India in Civil Appeal 115 of 1998 and 116 of 1998 by order dated 19th March 2002. So, and this has benefited, no need to say, thousands of visually impaired persons across the country, this AICB initiative. The point also I'm trying to make is, law by itself is not enough. Unfortunately, the biggest resistance comes from those who are lawmakers, who are supposed to implement the law, who are duty bearers, as Mr. Dharia and Mr. Vashish were saying in the morning. The duty bearers are the biggest culprits because they don't want to implement the law. Why they don't want to? I can't understand. It doesn't cost anything personal, I'm sure. It's again a question of attitude. So ultimately, it's attitude that decides everything. If in 1970s and 80s, there were people who were denied employment opportunities despite the fact that they were highly qualified, there were some others who were doing very well. People were appointed in the 80s as lecturers, as very senior bank managers in the public sector also. There's the other side to it. Again, the issue of barrier comes in. The biggest attitude, the barrier, the attitude is positive, I think is positive. So this order came in 2002, but not enough. Even as Central University and University of Delhi did not implement that order. And then 2007, another case was filed by another NGO called Sambhavna to ensure the implementation of the reservation provisions for persons with disabilities, particularly visually impaired. And this came, the High Court was lethal, the Delhi High Court was lethal, and they stopped on all appointments in all colleges of Delhi University till the PWD quota was filled up. For 2.5 years, there were no appointments till the quota was filled up. So again, law was there, knowledge was there. Where was the employment? One had to struggle and struggle and struggle. The same condition by and large continues to be today also. If we talk about the RPD Act, Section 33 and 34 are important in this context. Section 33 talks about identification. Now, this issue is very important. In the morning, we were talking about this. What is identification? And also, when we when we want to learn about employment, when we want to understand employment in the context of RPD Act, we should not just look at sections 33 and 34. We should also look at RPD rules 2017 and amended rule 2019. And we should also talk about the DOPT-OM of 15 January 2018, the list of identified jobs as issued on 4th January 2021, and also various court judgments which have recently made. So understanding employment in the context of persons with disabilities is not something very easy. It's not something very easy. It is something that's very complex. I won't say complicated, complex and very sensitive, because there are fine readings of these laws and judgments. And if these are missed, much may be missed as far as employment opportunities for the visually impaired are concerned. So let's begin with identification. What is identification in employment? It is discussed both in the DOPT-OM in 2018 and also in section 33 of the RPD Act. So two factors are important for identification. First, reservation can only take place when there is an identification of post. The post is found to be suitable to be held by a person with disability. This has both its positive and negative aspects. Positive, because if a committee has decided, a nodal committee in the central government has decided that a post is suitable to be held by a person with such a particular disability, then the individual employers cannot create barriers for you. They cannot say, no, you're not suitable to work on this post, or we will not give you what we call reasonable accommodation or equipment, because the post is suitable to be held, so nobody can take away from that identification. So it's a beneficial thing. The negative aspect of that is, which is there also in the DOPT-OMs, that if a post is not identified for a person with disability, then that person with disability cannot apply on that post even as a general candidate. Because it says a PWD can apply for a post even as an unreserved category, provided that a post is identified. Now this creates a problem. Because as Mr. Dharia was saying this morning, that visually impaired persons have done very well in areas which you could not think of. Recently, we have a student this year in Delhi University who's doing MSc Genetics, visually impaired. MSc Genetics, couple of years ago, we had somebody who was doing MSc Physics. And before that, somebody came for BSc Maths. They're all visually impaired and having the requisite qualification. But at one time, nobody thought that maths, subjects like maths, physics, genetics could be studied by visually impaired. We had a very interesting case of a person who has done her MSc in maths from a college of Delhi University, had done the JRF, but her name could not figure in the ad hoc list of the university because the post for mathematics is not identified for visually impaired in the government list. Now this is a problem. When the government list does not identify a post, however qualified you are, unless somebody wants to make an exception, real exception, and further identify the post, or further identify the post is a problem, because you may do it for one person because somebody is qualified, but later on the same provision can be misused by an employer by always giving reservation on posts which are not identified by government, but which you identify because you think somebody is qualified, but you won't find such persons again and again, and therefore keep de-reserving them after 2 or 3 advertisements. So there's a problem with identification there. On one hand, identification is good because it helps people find suitable job, work environments, not just job, but work environments. It's a bad thing because in case you happen to be good in an area, but the post is not identified, you have difficulty finding employment. Be it as it is, right now the rule is that you can perhaps get employment only if the post is identified. But the list of identified posts keeps changing. There was a list in 2000, it's supposed to come out every 3 years, keeping in view the advances in technology. That's a condition. Not just a list has to review, it has to review with specific reference to technology, because technology is a game changer for the visually impaired in particular, and I would say persons with disabilities in general. It's a game changer. There's many things visually impaired persons could not do at one time. They are able to do it now very comfortably with the help of technology. Since some years ago, it was believed that OCRs in Indian languages are impossible. Impossible because of the number of various fonts and various kinds of writing styles and all that. Now we have OCRs of so many Indian languages. Till very, very recently, I used to often think of this, that when I get picture messages, I need to then share that with some app to understand the picture. I said, why should there be a need for a visually impaired person to do that? There should be some way by which the phone automatically should find, when it sees the picture, it should start reading out the picture or describing. It seemed impossible. The app has to be activated, but not anymore. iPhone has a feature. The moment it sees you are on the picture and you highlight that, it will start describing or reading the picture to you. So even that problem is solved. You can see the picture. Handwriting also can be read to quite an extent. All these things were unthinkable at one time. And same is the case with many other disabilities. For instance, for the sign language, there are apps which can lip read. There are apps which can convert speech into text. That the audio, if the audio is running, then the app automatically converts their audio into text. So they are able to real time understand what is being spoken. So technology is a game changer. Because technology is a game changer, identification has to factor in technology. And therefore, identification is a progressive activity. The number of posts would keep increasing. You will see that in the 2021 list, the number of posts which are identified are much more than in the earlier list. The rule was that these should be identified every 3 years. Typically, it's happening every 6 years, and more than that. 2001, 2007, 2013, and 2021. We don't know when the next one would come. But so it is. If you went by the schedule 2022, another list should have been there, but obviously 2021, the list has come out, so it's too early to do that. Then we come to reservation. What does reservation mean? It's a very technical issue. It seems okay, it seems very simple. 4% reservation, out of which 1% for the visually impaired, 1% for the moderate disability, 1% for this. Not that simple. The first question is 4% of what? As was said in the morning, reservation for PWDs is vacancy based. And there's a great deal of difference between post-based and vacancy-based. To give you one illustration, there may be one post and there may be 10 vacancies against that post. How does it work? There's one post, somebody is appointed, one vacancy, and one post are filled. After 3 days, that person resigns. A second vacancy has occurred. The post is only one. After 2 days, again somebody resigns from that post who was appointed. Third vacancy is occurred, and so on and so forth. And the PWD roster, there was a big debate on this, whether it should be post-based or vacancy-based. The debate continued for good 18 years. After which the Supreme Court held that PWD roster is vacancy-based, and believe me, that's much more beneficial than a post-based roster. There are many segments of our activism which believe that the post-based roster is better, but it is not the case. Because then it will freeze the reservation to the point. There are 100 posts in an establishment and 4 people are appointed. If it's post-based, then nobody can be appointed till those 4 people retire, or one of them retires or dies or whatever, resigns. But in vacancy-based, it's a rolling roster. So as vacancies keep upping, as others also keep retiring, your reservation quota is increasing. But the biggest problem is, where are the rosters? Most establishments, even government departments, I understand, are not maintaining the rosters. And that's what, and I'm just watching time. Can someone tell me a time? 2:48, yeah. I want to do, I'll cover this part of reservation and then we'll take a break because our guest speaker's time is precious. So we will continue on URSPT and the rest of the part I'll come back at 3:30 or maybe next time, perhaps. We'll see. So reservation, what is reservation? And where are the rosters? Most government departments do not prepare roster. If you put an RTI and ask for a vacancy-based roster, you won't get it. Most universities are also not preparing the roster. In fact, when I took over as a notary officer PWD rosters in 2014, rosters were in terrible shape. Thankfully, I can happily say that today, Delhi University is 100% compliant as far as PWD rosters and PWD reservations are concerned. We can happily challenge any university or department in the country to prove our rosters incorrect as per defined procedures. They are very much within our defined procedures, and we are like 100% compliant. But how many universities can claim that? And that's a major area of advocacy. Ensure the rosters are there in your departments, in the universities, in education departments for school education, in government departments. RTI can be a very important tool to ensure the rosters are in place. Then it is not just enough, as many of it has been mentioned, 4% reservation are for PWPD or reservation as per government rules. You have to specify the vacancy for a particular disability in order to effect reservation. If it just says 4% reservation for PWBD, it is not enough. You have to specify which vacancy on what post is reserved for which category of disability. That also has to be done. And that's a 4%. Then one challenge is which disability gets the preference. There's a big debate on this. The order given in section 34 of RPD Act is visually impaired, the hearing impaired, the locomotive impaired, and the multiple disabilities and intellectual disabilities that way. But the point is, there's another order of the government says that the head of the institution can decide which point to give to which category of disability. Now that is a challenge because then many departments are giving the last preference to visually impaired. Some are giving first also. In Delhi University, we have reserved the first point for the visually impaired, but not all are doing that. And this is where there's a loophole which people are using to get by appointing certain more severe categories of disabilities, including the visually impaired. And we need to be alert to that. Then what does reservation mean? Okay, you are advertised, but is advertisement of a vacancy reserved for a particular category enough? No. Rule 11 of 2017 rules clearly says that the first count would be till the recruitment process is over and persons with disabilities would be counted as a separate class for that purpose. Separate class means that a vacancy would be reserved. Many people say SC, PWD, OBC, PWD. That is not acceptable. Everybody would enter as a PWD first. There is a Supreme Court judgment also on that. And after the recruitment, even DOPT says that, after the recruitment, they would be adjusted in their respective horizontal categories. Reservation in employment for PWD, as we all know, is horizontal in nature. So it's important. If some people advertise twice and say we have done the process, rule is that you have to advertise twice for one category and then interchange the category and the vacancy can be changed. So people just advertise, but do not follow the recruitment process and say, now we advertise 3 times, the vacancy has gone to general quota. That does not work. Unless you complete the recruitment process, you can't count as 1, 2, or 3. This was also a route which has been used by some people to get by reservations. So we need to be very alert to this also, that our state governments, our universities do not use this route. Reservation is still one area where a lot of work can be done. A lot of advocacy can take place in your states, but you have to do it, nobody else. So what is interchange of vacancy? Interchange of vacancy is, suppose you reserve one vacancy for a particular category and you do not find a suitable person. So this also is a paradoxical state, because on one hand, the government rules say you have to give adequate relaxations. On the same one also says if you don't find a suitable person. So which one to believe? Do we believe relaxations or do we believe suitability to be a criteria for appointment? And this is where the problem is. In PWD reservation, unlike SC/ST reservation, many things have been left loose, giving space to employers to get by reservations. I think I'll stop here for a time being, because Rajiv is with us right now, and we should not take his time. I would continue on some of the other aspects of reservation and what the AICB has done, and some of the employment-related OMs. Maybe at 3:30 or some other time, we'll see how you feel about it after Mr. Rathuri's talk. Thank you very much for this for a time being, but we will definitely continue this discussion. It's a very vast topic, as I said right in the beginning. Much can be said, and there's no end to this. But yeah, if you talk about employment, these are some of the fundamentals that we need to know. And anything else we'll talk in the course of time later. Thank you very much.